Hey guys, I am Bethany Quinn, and I am here today with Gresham Harkless, who is the founder and host of the CEO podcasts, and he is also uh, you're the founder of Media,
Blue
Blue
16
CC
Media.
Media. Yes,
Mhm.
cool. Here we go. So we're going to chat. We're going to talk about some of the great work he's doing, as well as some of he's put together a collection of CEO hacks. So he's going to talk a little bit about that too. And while we're chatting, I am going to be making lemon curd, or attempting to. We'll see how it goes.
Nice.
So thank you so much, Gresham, for coming on. I had been on your podcast, and you're much more organized than I am. But it's a really great podcast, and you interview a lot of really interesting people. So how did you come about to that? How did you start your podcast?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I appreciate being on the show. And it's so funny. Like I've been doing the podcast for so long. This podcast is fairly newer. So I've been doing it for about a year and a half, but I had a podcast before that. It was like 3 or 4 years before. So I always say, if you think I'm organized, rewind the clock to day one and see how organized I wasn't, where I couldn't even remember the person's name. And I have a bunch of blooper reels for that. But
Nice.
for me, I pretty much I've always been interested in entrepreneurship and business, and everything kind of really started. I used to go around Lake Ridge, Occoquan area, and I used to interview entrepreneurs and business owners, find out why they started their business, what made them successful. And I did that freelance writing. I actually tore my Achilles tendon, and when I tore my Achilles tendon, I couldn't get around anymore to do it. So I was essentially stuck in the bed, just working at that time on what ended up being CEO Blog Nation. And CEO Blog Nation is just a community of niche blogs for entrepreneurs and business owners to help make them more effective and efficient. And what happened actually was that I used to record the interviews. And every time I would do the interviews, I would listen to the interviews, go back to the computer, write out the blog post, and then send it to the person that was featured. And then I realized, hey, like, these audio interviews or these recordings that aren't really polished, they're kind of a value. I like listening to them. So why not make it into a podcast? And so that's what really started out with my first podcast, which is now more of a long form podcast. And then I have the Laser Focused Daily podcast that you've been on, that I try to take the best kind of questions, including like everyone's favorite CEO hacks, and things that make them efficient, and kind of, I guess, made it into like a franchisable, more systematized type podcast.
Nice. So what are some of your favorite episodes that you've done thus far? You don't have to say me. It's cool.
Yes, I was definitely gonna say you. No, I mean, I think the biggest thing I love about the podcast is actually the variety of the different types of interviewees, I should say. So I absolutely love having the whole idea, and kind of like the thesis of the podcast. It's called the I Am CEO podcast. It's really to look at business and entrepreneurship, and really look at it from a holistic standpoint. Because I think so many times when you hear CEO, even when I reach out to people, they say, well, I'm not really a CEO. I just have, I'm a one man or woman band, or I've only been in business for, 30 days, or I just have this blog that I'm working on. So I almost feel like I'm not a CEO. But what I'm hoping to do with the podcast is really to provide like a holistic look at business and entrepreneurship, and what exactly helps people, be more successful. But I've had really great, CEOs, as far as the former CEO of like Calvin Klein, and CEOs like that. But I've also had the local, mom and pop shop, and that owner, or I've had the startup. So it's hard for me to choose. I'm sure you hear this a lot, that it's kind of like, I don't have any children, I have a dog, but I imagine if I have more than one dog, it's always hard to choose your favorite one. But everyone's special in their own unique way. So it's really hard for me to choose that. But my goal is hopefully that everyone can listen to at least one episode and have it resonate with them, and see themselves in the person that's in the show. And I hope that encourages and inspires and gives them some tactical resources on how they can be an entrepreneur and business owner too.
Well, how about what are some notable podcasts that you've done?
Yeah, so probably the former CEO of Calvin Klein. That's definitely a big name. I think I've also had basically a lot of local business owners. So people that are really doing inspiring things. Like I know you had a startup as well too, especially for women entrepreneurs. I've had on my longer form podcast. I was actually just talking with my girlfriend actually about this and was saying that one of the things that's not really talked about in the business and entrepreneurship space is like burnout and stress and the kind of behind the scenes aspect. So I actually had a young man actually who attempted suicide. He didn't actually, he didn't finish it, I guess that's the right way to say it. But at the end of the day, he was empowered to create his own nonprofit. And through that nonprofit, he basically talked about a lot of the stress, a lot about the behind the scenes things that we don't sometimes look at. Especially as sometimes we're mostly type A's that really drive. So I think that I really like interviews like that, not obviously because it happened, but because it brings light to some of the stresses, the frustrations, and not just bringing light to that, but also awareness of it so that we know how to kind of take those steps and I guess cope, if that's the right word.
Definitely. So in that, one of the questions that you ask is, what is your CEO hack? And you were telling me you've put together a collection of those. So what are some of your, or actually tell me about the collection, and then what are some of your favorite hacks that you've heard?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I have those 6 set questions I usually ask throughout the show, and one of them, my absolute favorite one, is CEO hacks, because I'm a hack nut. I'm always trying to find out how to be more effective and efficient, whether it be something to download or something to do on a regular everyday basis. So my personal favorite hacks, I use an app called, or software called Basecamp. Which basically helps organize all the different projects. And I have a digital marketing company. So each client has its own Basecamp, and each client has its own team member that is related to that Basecamp as well too. So I'm able to kind of organize all of that very quickly, very easily, and efficiently through that. So that's one of my favorite personally. And then I have a scheduling link as well. And those are kind of like my go-tos as far as I've been huge time savers. But interesting enough, when you start to do the podcast, and it's a daily podcast, so you start to see certain trends of things that effective and efficient people do on a regular basis. And I think one of the absolute biggest things that has come across has been the importance of morning routine and how to basically manage all the stresses and everything that come with owning a business or starting anything or being a creative, but jumping and doing that by adding an extra 30 minutes or an hour or whatever at the very beginning of the day. It's one of the most consistent things that I've heard throughout the show. And I think that when I had a morning routine and I did it somewhat, but I think hearing it over and over again, you realize how important that is. When you're having really, really great days, it's great to have your morning routines. But even when you're having really not so great days, it gives you that opportunity to kind of have that consistency. So those are, big things. There's other tangible things like the book, like the E-Myth has come up. A lot of people mention scheduling links, or Asana is another kind of project management system. But basically on that site, what I've done is I've compiled a lot of the hacks that we use on our team, but also a lot of the hacks that have come up during the podcast, and basically organized it so that people can look for, if they're starting a podcast, maybe they're looking for certain podcast hacks, so they can go under that category, find all the hacks related to that. If they're looking for books, they can go and find some books related to what it is that they're doing. So trying to organize all that content and information and all the kind of things that we can do to be effective and efficient. So like if you're like, okay, I know I'm spending too much time scheduling social media, you can go to the marketing social media tab, and then you can say, okay, well, maybe these things can help me out as far as being more effective and efficient, so I don't spend as much time there. But I think that's the thing I'm definitely working on and most excited about.
That's very awesome. And you also do media consulting.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into that actually?
So I think, so Blue 16 Media is really we focus on web design and SEO, but I have like this philosophy that I talk about where I say you are a media company. And really a lot of it came from just my personal interest. Like I talked about the podcast that's under a brand called CB Nation. And that includes like the podcast and everything B2B related, the blogs, everything that I talked about before. The kind of basis of it really started, and I usually tell the story where my dad was in the military, so he actually went TDY for a year. And when he went TDY, this is before Zoom, before Skype, before FaceTime, all these kind of cool things we have to be like connected instantly with each other. We actually used to just send care packages to him every month. So he was away in the in UAE, and we used to send basically treats and stuff that he wanted and also things that he needed as well. But he wasn't really as connected as he could be to the family because we would always just call or we would send emails, things like that. So I actually started a family newspaper at that time, and that family newspaper,
Oh, that's so cute.
yeah, and my mom kept all of them. So I did it for about 2 years, but basically every single month I had a jazzy name like Jam in July or something. So it'd be all the July news, and I would put some news that I would find online, some sports stuff, but I also put things that were going on in our family. So I was kind of like the newscaster at the very beginning. So I took those packages and I would send them to, within the care package. So my dad would also be connected, and in true like kind of business and entrepreneurial form. I also sold the subscriptions to my family members as well too, just to make a little extra money that every 9 or 10-year-old needs for whatever. But when I was trying to figure out like what my gifts are, what my zone of genius was, I kind of went back to that. So I started doing kind of like that media aspect, or had that mentality at a young age where I had like a problem, so to speak. And then I was able to kind of figure out the tools that I can use to solve that problem. And for mine, it was building that family newspaper. So that's a lot of what I do on a much more accelerated level to businesses and organizations. Is just, there's so many different tools out there. As you're making something right now, you have an idea of what you're trying to create, and you have to figure out what ingredients go into what you're trying to create to help you reach that end goal. And so many times, if you don't choose the right ingredients, or you put too much of the wrong ingredients in there, you don't get what you want at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, when businesses are trying to figure out, should I be on this social media site or that? Should I invest in SEO or SEM? How should my website be designed? I usually say, figure out these 3 questions. Answer those 3 questions, and then from there you get to figure out what ingredients are essential to that end product that you want to create. So that's kind of how I got started, and kind of a little bit more of like the philosophy and how that ties in to everything I do with Blue 16 Media and even CB Nation and the podcast.
Very cool. And I think you do a really good job of sort of connecting your businesses together. So like when I was on your show, you said, hey, also like, let me know if you want your like free assessment, and then, which ties into Blue 16 Media, but also like, it's, then if, your assessment says your website sucks, then you offer your services.
Exactly.
You would put it much more politely. But,
yes, a little bit more delicate than that. But no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I try to make it very, like, I'm really big into alignment and having everything flow. So I think it takes some time to get there, but I think even if you look at some of the colors that are used on the CB Nation logo versus the Blue 16 Media logo, you'll see like even the blue kind of overlaps. And a lot of the consistency, not just from a visual standpoint, but in like the steps and everything and how everything overlaps, is something I kind of still working on, but always look to try to achieve as seamlessly as possible.
Nice, very exciting. And so besides, in addition to the stuff you've been talking about here, like how are you handling like, I don't know, this brave new world that we're living in, with COVID-16 and just everything that's been going on?
Yeah, it's tough, and my heart definitely goes out to everybody that's struggling through everything. I think it's so interesting just because it's not something that has hit just one state. And I was reading something that has said like sometimes if there's like a wildfire, it might hit one part or one city in California, but this has literally changed the entire world at the exact same time. So it's definitely a a transitional time. It's a difficult time, I think, for everybody in some form, shape, or fashion. For me, I I work from home. I mentioned a lot of the digital tools that I use, and I have team members in different, countries and states and things like that. So we were pretty much set up for a lot of these things, not anticipating that anything like this was going to happen, but we were fairly digital and lean. However, the personal aspect of it is just really, really difficult because I'm borderline extrovert. So just being able to kind of go to networking events, and I know that's even how we connected, just being able to kind of go and just see people, be around people even, has been and is still really difficult. Um, I can't say that I perfected it, but you just try to understand that maybe this time has happened for a reason, and maybe it's allowed you to kind of work on things that you wouldn't. So a lot of internal projects that I always or never had time for, now you have more than enough time to kind of do them. So I worked on
Well,
a
what are
lot.
some of those projects?
Huh?
What are some of the projects that you're working
One
on?
of them was the CEO hacks, because I had this vision of that and trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do, to kind of bring all those things together. And I had a list or companies that I had kind of partnered with like affiliates and things like that, but I never like put it all together. It was all kind of in my head. So now that's definitely one of the things, just internally working on like the content on the website, potentially trying out other products and services. Like we're potentially gonna white labeling of services. I'm going to brand it as blue labeling services for other digital marketers, but things like that kind of wouldn't have happened if I was on the go and as busy as I could have been, have allowed me the chance to do that. But I think that, yeah, I mean, I think if anything, it's forced me to be a lot more, I guess, process driven, in the sense that I have to make sure that I have my oxygen mask on. I usually say, to make sure that I'm taken care of, so that I can try to make sure that I can take care of clients, because I have storefront clients, and my heart goes out to them because it's a completely different world, and I know the frustration, and I've heard the frustration, and you don't know exactly what to do, but you want to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself so that you're able to kind of even be there for somebody else. So not sure if I have like a blueprint on exactly how to handle and cope with everything, but you just try to take it a day at a time and try to make sure that you're getting your rest and meditating and praying and doing all those things that help to make it a little more, I guess, manageable.
Totally. And so with storefront clients, have
Mhm.
you seen anything? Is there anything in particular that you're recommending that they do to sort of pivot their company, while, things are sort of changing?
Absolutely. So I actually had on my show, another one of my favorite interviews was Mike McAllowitz, and he's done a bunch of books. And one of the things he said, and I interviewed him like I want to say maybe a week or two after everything was starting to happen, and he had a really great idea. And I think so many entrepreneurs and business owners don't realize the expertise that they've built, especially if they've had a storefront. They've been doing it for a long period of time. And a lot of times they say, you don't have to be at the finish line for your industry. But if you're 3-4 steps ahead of the people that are trying to learn from you, you have an opportunity to really kind of build something around there. So for those businesses, I mean, I think the quickest thing that you can do is, if you provide some type of product, is definitely, if you haven't already, leverage an e-commerce site. If you have a WordPress site, you can build it into that. If you have Squarespace or Wix or Weebly, a lot of times they have like add-ons that you can add that into your website. But I think that's one of the quickest things that you can do. But speaking to what Mike McAllowitz was saying, and what I believe as well too, is if you have an expertise, there's been a big push into people building their own kind of personal brands. And a lot of that personal brand is, I've built this expertise for 10, 15 years, whatever that might be. You might be able to teach other people some of the skills that you have to be successful. So if it's digital marketing and you've been in business for 10 years and you know exactly how to help equip people with the tools, the tips, the information they need to be successful, why not create a course? Why not do coaching calls? Why not do all of those things that allow you to show your expertise and kind of pivot your business from that standpoint? But I think that really this time as well too should be a really big reminder for people that have storefronts, for people that even don't have storefronts, is that you always want to make sure that you're creating multiple streams of revenue. If you have just one business and you're only making revenue from one aspect, you really want to be thinking about other ways that you can kind of complement that and always be kind of testing out things, be okay with testing out things. But I think in this time, and I think in most times, activity and trying out and testing things is what helps or provides that opportunity for people to win and be successful.
Awesome. Very cool. And are there any, beyond sort of what you're talking about in terms of best practices, is there anything like genius that you've seen people do during this time?
Yeah, so I love marketing ideas that really helps my soul to really see a really good marketing idea. So I actually had someone, I was on I think I was in a Facebook group or something, and there was this contest where if you answer a question on the Facebook page, then you can potentially win lunch with that person. And they would randomly select exactly who. So I filled it out, or I completed added a comment, and then actually won. So I actually had lunch with somebody, a Zoom lunch, where she actually purchased lunch in order to help support a local business. And that was delivered directly to me, and we hopped on Zoom, and then we had lunch together. And that person has been on my podcast. I've been to her networking group. She's been to my networking group. But it's just really a great way to kind of think creatively, create that win-win-win opportunity. Because I'm really big into, of course, you want to win once, but if you can win 5-6 times and you can create that situation, that would be really awesome. So Deborah Myers, a virtual art, she was on my podcast, and she does a really good job of kind of thinking outside of the box. And I think the thing I love about it the most, because I think so many times we're trying to figure out how can we support, these local businesses. Oh, I can't go to their place, but there's so many ways if we think outside the box that we can kind of create those opportunities to not just be successful in one way, but in so many different ways.
That's awesome. Very cool. And let's see, what else was I going to ask you? So what's coming down the pipeline for you? Is there any, besides, well, in addition to the Awesome CEO Hacks book, how are you hoping, your business will grow or change? And what can people do to help you?
Great question. I think the biggest thing is I really want to create kind of like different media sites that fulfill different needs. And really provide different news and content across so many different ways. So what's coming down the pipeline is different, when we're talking about, let's just say 5 years or so, is really trying to create different brands that fulfill and connect with different markets. So that everything from health and wellness, in different industries like that, where creating essentially a site that is basically dedicated to that and provides those entrepreneurs and business owners a way to connect with those people that are interested in those services. And I think there's a really tremendous opportunity, kind of along the same lines of my marketing philosophy, that you are a media company, to build different media companies in different industries. And that can be everything from science and mathematics. It really can build into so many different niches. But I think that that's really what Blue 16 Media is going to transition into, is not just a way to help you build your media empire, but also building certain media properties as well too, so that you have different ones that you can kind of go to and connect with. But as far as just how to support, I mean, if you have any ideas, I'm always great to hear ideas. If you want to engage or be on the blog or the podcast, I'm always looking for people. The whole goal of everything we do is from CB Nation is try to help business owners be successful. So if we're able to kind of do that by having you on a show or doing an email interview or even, just having a guest post or something like that, or even sharing that out, that's always of great value for us, because we're always trying to reach as many people as possible. And I think that as we start to build more properties, if it's something that you feel like resonates with you, I would love to kind of collaborate or kick around ideas.
Awesome. Very cool. And then just anything else you want to talk about before we hop off?
No, I mean, I truly appreciate you taking some time out. I love to be on your show and see all the awesome things that you're doing. So I'm just happy to be a part of it. Hopefully I provided some type of value to everybody today. And I hope everything comes out well with everything you're preparing to.
Yeah, it's looking a little questionable right now. It's like not supposed to be lumpy anymore. And yeah.
You know what's so funny? Like, that's what I talk about. So like I have I have sweet potato pie. So I have my UR media company. I always talk about sweet potato pie. And I always say that the whole thing, I have 6 steps that you go through. So it's the same thing as like your marketing process. And I say the 6th step is that if it doesn't come out how you want it to go, then that arrow goes right back into the steps where you do it all over again, because that's the whole entire thing. You just keep working on it till you perfect it. So it's a process, right?
Totally. Oh, I know what I was going to ask. I keep meaning to like add this as sort of a signature question. Yeah. What was one of your favorite meals ever, or 1 or 2 of your favorite meals ever?
Favorite meals ever. So one of my favorite dishes ended up being, and I don't know if it was just because of the whole experience, but my summer of my junior year in college, and I went to Howard University in DC. I got to go to Spain, France, and Morocco. I didn't go to Morocco, but I went to Spain and France. But in Spain, they have this dish called paella, which is amazing. And I had it here in the States. It wasn't quite the same. So I don't know if it was just where I had it or what, but that had to be one of my favorite dishes. And I don't know if it's just because of where I was, if it was the sangria that helped out too. I don't know what it was, but it was just being in a different country and having those different experiences, and then really getting to eat paella it was amazing. And I can definitely say, like, the sweet potato pie that I talked about too. And I'm a real big sweet guy. So I would say pineapple cake is one of my favorites. But I think I can be a foodie, definitely. One of the things I love doing, one of the reasons I love traveling is actually going to try the different food in different places. So between that and I know you got me going. So this might be turned into a whole different type of show.
All good.
But I think I remember the crepes in France too with Nutella. They were amazing. So it's hard to choose just one, but if I had to, I might go with the paella, because that's still, I feel like, one of those experiences that hasn't been duplicated yet.
So what was it about? It sounds like it was the experience as much as the dish. So tell me a little bit more about the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that every time that I've, for the most part, traveled, it was a lot in a short period of time, but I think it was really cool because it was about, I want to say 20 of us. And I joined a fraternity too. I think I just joined that fraternity. Yeah, I had just joined that fraternity after or right before I went on the trip. So one of my line brothers also went on that trip. And I think it was about 20 of us from Howard that went, and maybe some that weren't in Howard, but I think we were all from Howard. But we just got to go see so many different sites. And I think so many times I've traveled, it's kind of been like, and don't get me wrong, we did, go from we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. But I think I never really traveled. I've never really studied abroad. I always wanted to, but to get 2 weeks to kind of be in a different country, trying different food, different cuisines, and really just having a unique experience and being around, even I didn't know everybody that was on the trip either. I think that was probably part of it as well too, as part of the experience, because I'm always really big into getting outside of your comfort zones. And I think that when you do that, that's really when kind of awesome things can happen. So I feel like that might have been part of it as well too, is just not being there. And it always helps that the food is amazing, but I think the whole experience and being and seeing the Eiffel Tower at night and all those things kind of just builds up into a really phenomenal experience.
Nice. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Actually, I was going to try to add this butter. Have you ever had lemon curd before? I feel like it's one of those things that I've always wanted to try, but like never quite had it. I feel like it was, or like one of those dishes that I romanticized when I was a kid. I don't know.
Yes. Well, you have to definitely let me know how it turns out. It looks like it's going good though.
I will.
See?
Most definitely. Yeah, no, it's whoops. it's pretty good. So well, thank you so much. Here we go. Now I'm adding in the butter. All right. This is not supposed to be how I'm supposed to be doing it, but
you might be innovating. There might be something new. After this goes live, everybody might be doing it exactly how you're doing it after that. So
that'll be the day. They'll be like, this lemon curd looks kind of mediocre and chunky. I don't think it's supposed to look like that. It's not really a double boiler, is it? Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gresh. It was good to see you. And hopefully I will see you again in person when the world reopens.
Exactly. When the world goes, I don't want to say back to normal, whatever the new normal is. Hopefully we'll see each other in person. But I appreciate you for having me on.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.